On this super review, let's take a look at the Final E1000. So in an earlier super review, I looked at the Final E2000. This is the E1000. I looked at the 2000 a while back and I quite liked it. It's a pretty warm, kind of bassy sound with pretty relaxed treble, but it's a pretty nice, mature sounding headphone in, you know, like the sub $50 range, where most stuff under 50 bucks is, there's some good stuff, but it's, I don't know that I'd call it so much mature sounding generally, while the Finals I would describe as fairly mature. Now here we've got the Final E1000, and this is even cheaper than the E2000. So again, the E2000 I think was around 45 bucks if I recall correctly. And this, well, it's not available on Amazon yet, but I did buy it on eBay for around $27. So I expect when it shows up on Amazon, it'll probably be 27, 30 bucks. Which for a nice IEM from the company Final, I've got, you know, that kind of high expectations that this thing will be a pretty good competitor in the sub $30 price range. But let's go ahead and open it up. We'll find out what we get inside the box of the Final E1000. Then I'll give it a listening test, run this against my typical music, a little De La Soul, some Alice in Chains acoustic stuff. No Michael Jackson, of course, and then I'll let you know, is this a really good option for 30 bucks or should you be looking at something else? Kind of a lame spin, I'll be honest, but let's see what we can find out about this headphone. So right off the bat, what I do know about this thing is that it is a single dynamic driver headphone. And that's the same for the Final E2000 as well as the Final E3000. This is, you know, a very simple headphone. And one of the things I really liked about the Final E2000 is this small design, which we also get here with the E1000. We do also get a high-res audio logo on the box, which tells you really everything you need to know. Around here in the back, we've got a little diagram showing off their sweet ear tips, and that might seem weird, but let me tell you right now, ever since I got the Final E2000s, I don't know, about 6 months ago, the ear tips that came with those have basically been my favorite ear tips. This thing is gonna come with those same ear tips and for under 30 bucks. So the E1000 is a 16 ohm headphone with a 102 decibel SPL sound sensitivity. Basically that means it's gonna get plenty loud off of pretty much any audio player. But let's go and open it up and find out what's inside. All right, so we got the Final E1000 completely unboxed, and this is what you get, which doesn't look like a lot because it's not a lot. But these things also don't cost that much, so I will not hold it against them, especially because they do come with my favorite ear tips. All right, so to start with, you do get a little bit of paperwork, but this is super minimal. It does come with a ton of QR codes. If you're an enthusiast, you can have fun with all of those. Like I mentioned, these are my favorite ear tips of any IEM ear tips that I've got, and part of it is the fact that they come in so many different sizes. So basically you're gonna find something that'll fit your ear perfectly. The other thing that I really like about them though is the general shape and like the gumminess, the stretchiness, and the grip of the rubber on these tips. It's really quite nice. And then we get to this cable, which is permanently installed on the headphones. You know, unlike some other headphones that I review on this channel, the cable is not replaceable. Now, that said, the cable that we have here is a decent feeling cable. You know, you can see that this thing was stuck in a box for who knows how long, and it's already losing its shape, so that's a good sign. Another thing that's an interesting sign is that this is actually a lot thicker than the cable that comes with the Final E2000. I don't know if people complained about it, because it's a very thin cable. People might have complained about it. And they came back with a cable that frankly feels quite a bit more robust. And then we get up here to the buds, and they've got really small nozzles here, which means that they're gonna fit most ears, I think, really well. There's no ventilation on the back of this. There's no vents in the back. And another big difference between these and the Final E2000s is that these are made out of all plastic. There's no metal here, which, I don't know. I'm not gonna complain, not for the price, but for another 15 bucks, you can get the Final E2000, which does have a slightly nicer finish to the shells. That said, look, what's really gonna matter is how do these things sound? What do these things like to live with? And so that's what I'm gonna go ahead and do. I'll pull my Walkman, hook these things up, run these things against my reference library of music. I think lately I've been listening to a lot of Alice in Chains acoustic. I like some FKJ. I think there's some good tracks on the FKJ's album that really show off the treble and the bass and the separation that you can get in them. Or if a headphone's not doing a great job, it's not gonna give you that separation. So I'm gonna go ahead and spend some time with these things and find out how these things stack up to other $30 IEMs. All right, after spending some time listening to the Final E1000 and comparing these to the more expensive brothers, the Final E2000, I'm ready to let you know what I think. And well, we can start with the things that are the most common between these headphones, and that is the build and the general look of this thing. Like Final's E2000, the E1000 here has got this build, these really small buds that I'm a big fan of this style. I don't know, it doesn't look like much, but just because of how small they are and how small they fit into the ear, I find them to be all day comfortable and very lightweight. They don't take up much space, and there's just something appealing about something this dinky tiny. The other thing that's really nice about these things that's also shared in common with the E2000 is these ear tips, which I think I mentioned during the unboxing are my favorite ear tips. Where the E1000 diverges a little bit from the other Final E series is, well, one, these buds are made out of plastic instead of metal, which, I don't know, that's a pretty minor point, but it is nicer to have the metal ones, right? The other thing is this cable right here, which is surprisingly, it's actually a little bit thicker and sturdier than the cable that you get on the more expensive Final E2000. Unfortunately, I don't really think that having a sturdier cable is necessarily a good thing. I think that the weight of this cable kind of dominates the weight of these really tiny buds, and it's maybe a minor point, but it's a little annoying. More to the point, the bottom half of this cable, and I'll see if I can show this on camera, it's essentially two wires that are stuck together, which sort of creates a flat surface. And it makes it so that when you try to wind up this headphone to put it away, it never really winds up very neat, and it's just always kind of bulky and just a little bit bulky for such a small headphone. It's a small complaint, I think, but it is something that I think the E2000 does better. And that brings us to talking about the sound of the E1000, which is actually more different from the E2000 than the build. The only similarities that I would really draw between this and the E1000 or the E2000 is that both of them are relatively warm sounding headphones. I think the E2000 it's a bassy, warm sound, which is to say that like the lower mid-range is about as loud as the upper mid-range. There's not much upper mid-range emphasis. And these things are also, I would say, fairly warm, but not nearly as warm as the E2000. Compared to the E2000, there is a little bit more upper mid-range emphasis here, and also, I would say, quite a bit less bass. Not necessarily that's a bad thing or a good thing, but that is one way to describe this. Generally, I would say that the sound in this is maybe a little bit flatter, but also I think a little bit more boring. It loses some of the dynamics that you get in the Final E2000, and generally I would say that the sound is kind of neutral, kind of warmish a little bit, but overall just kind of flat and dull in my opinion. Yeah, I would say the sound is a little bit flat, a little bit thin sounding. The treble up top is not especially like spiky or emphasized or anything like that, but it is still a little bit fatiguing. I think just more down to the tonality of the treble, I suppose. It's a little brittle sounding, I suppose, is one way you could describe it. You know, if you want a headphone that doesn't really emphasize anything in the sound frequency range, you might like the Final E1000 more than I do. I just find it kind of dull compared to the Final E2000. The E2000, again, it's got a little bit more emphasis in the bass. It's, I would say, a much fuller sound than the E1000. A little bit warmer, but overall, in my opinion, just more engaging. I did also compare these directly to Samsung's 8KG headphones, the ones that they pack in with a smartphone, because, I don't know, at this price range, you're basically looking for something, either to upgrade from the, the headphones that came with your smartphone, or you're looking for something to replace headphones that might have broken at some point, right? And in my opinion, I actually like the Samsung AKGs quite a bit more than these. I think the AKGs just sound a lot more dynamic. There's a lot more bass in those things, a little bit more treble emphasis, a little bit more upper mid-range, and generally just a more dynamic sound. I think that was actually a really good comparison to do for me, because it showed how flat and just kind of a narrow sound stage that the E1000 has, whereas you compare it to something that comes free with your smartphone, I think it's doing it better, frankly. So if I were to rate the Final E1000, I'd give them 3 stars out of 5. Look, I don't think they sound bad. I just think they sound kind of dull. And if dull is what you want, okay, nobody out there is saying they want a dull sounding headphone, but if you want something that sounds relatively flat and neutral-ish, there's not a lot under 30 bucks that gives you that. If that's what you want, you might like the E1000. There's not a lot of bass here. There's not a lot of upper mid-range, which means that the vocals are, you don't get that vocal forwardness that I like. The treble is a little bit fatiguing, but mostly just down to, I guess, the timbre of it. Yeah, overall, not my favorite headphone, but definitely not the worst. And like I said before, I do really like the build, or I like this style of earbud quite a bit. If you're interested in checking out the Final E1000, of course, I've got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you on the next super review.